The guests froze. The bride's smile cracked. At the center of it all stood a man, voice raw, face red, shouting at the woman who gave him life. "You shouldn't be here! You'll ruin everything!" he hissed. Her hands quivered, her wheelchair shaking just slightly, and for a moment the whole room was silent. What did she do to deserve this? And why was her own son so ashamed? Before we find out what really happened that day, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. What she did next would make everyone in that hall regret staying silent. The church was full. Flowers, music, every seat taken. But the moment Emmanuel stepped forward, nodding toward the back where his mother sat in her wheelchair, everything changed. The hall went cold, like someone turned off the light. Emmanuel's voice echoed off the walls. "You shouldn't be here. You'll ruin everything." Mama Rose didn't answer at first. She just sat there, trembling, looking down at her hands, trying to steady her breathing. The guests watched, mouths open, waiting for another blow or a word, but she stayed quiet. The silence stretched. Nobody knew what had happened before this moment. The whispers had started long before Emmanuel's outburst. Some said Mama Rose had abandoned Emmanuel when he was a teenager. Others said she'd done something worse, or maybe nothing at all, and only Emmanuel believed she did. But whatever people believed, they were all waiting now to see what she would do. 6 months earlier, Emmanuel had been a proud young man. He grew up in a small Midwestern town with his mother, Rose. After his father died suddenly when Emmanuel was 14, Rose raised him by herself. She worked 2 jobs, drove him to school, patched his clothes, and stayed up late helping him finish college applications. Emmanuel often said she was the strongest person he knew. But as Emmanuel entered his 20s, things changed. He began to pull away. He started hiding Rose's letters, missed family gatherings, and avoided her calls. Rose grew older and less steady on her feet, but she never lost her dignity. Then, Emmanuel fell in love with his high school sweetheart, Sarah. They planned a big wedding. Emmanuel insisted that everything be perfect, the dress, the guests, the speeches. But on the day of the rehearsal, a cousin mentioned Rose would be coming in her wheelchair. Emmanuel's face darkened. He told his cousin firmly, "She can't walk me down the aisle. It'll embarrass us." Rose heard it. She sat in the kitchen late at night, hand on Emmanuel's baby photo, crying so softly the walls didn't hear. She hoped he'd change his mind, but when the invitations went out, there was no address for her, no RSVP line. On the morning of the wedding, Rose arrived quietly at the back entrance of the church. She wore a pale blue dress, her hair done, wheelchair clean. She was only hoping to see her son get married, to feel the pride she once knew. When Emmanuel saw her, everything snapped. He accused her of ruining the image, of making everyone uncomfortable. Guests gasped. Some shifted in their seats, but no one stood up. Rose finally rose, trembling on her wheelchair, and looked at Emmanuel. Her voice was soft, but strong. "I didn't abandon you. I never left you. I raised you while losing more than you could ever imagine. I'm here because I love you. You can't erase me just to look good." A murmur ran through the church. Emmanuel's face fell, Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Others saw a mother, steady even as her legs failed, still standing in the fight. In that moment, something changed. The guests realized this wasn't just about a perfect wedding, it was about a family that needed to heal. Sarah walked forward, took Emmanuel's hand, and said, "If we're doing this, we're doing it with her, all of us." Then she wheeled Rose forward, beside them at the altar. After the ceremony, guests approached Rose, some to apologize, others to thank her. Emmanuel stayed silent, standing beside his mother and wife. He never said he was sorry, but when the night ended, he stayed with Rose, pushing her wheelchair to the car. Rose left knowing she'd been seen, finally. Emmanuel left in silence, changed. And the guests left reminded that dignity, love, and acceptance matter more than perfection. How does Rose's experience make you feel, knowing the person who raised Emmanuel was denied the simple right to be near her son on his wedding day? If you were in Emmanuel's shoes, would you make the same choices, or would you protect your parents no matter what others thought? What does family really mean when someone's past or their disability becomes part of the story? Let me know in the comments how you feel about Emmanuel, Rose, and Sarah, and how you would react if this was your family. Long before the wedding, before the music and the flowers and the whispers in the church, there was a woman named Mama Rose. Once, she was a nurse, known in her small town for her kindness, for staying hours after her shift to comfort frightened patients. But everything changed one rainy evening when she ran into the street to save a child from an oncoming car. The child lived. Rose didn't, at least not in the same way. The accident crushed her spine, leaving her paralyzed from the waist down. Overnight, the woman who once stood tall beside hospital beds now faced the world from a wheelchair. She never complained. Even when the bills stacked high and her legs refused to move, she told her son, "We don't give up, Emmanuel. We rise different, but we rise all the same." She lived by that, every single day. Emmanuel was her only child, a boy with a quiet smile, bright eyes, and dreams that stretched far beyond the limits of their small rented home. From the beginning, he wanted to make her proud. When other boys stayed out late, Emmanuel stayed in, studying under a flickering lamp while his mother dozed in her chair beside him. Sometimes she'd wake to find him asleep over his books, her hand instinctively reaching out to cover him with her old shawl. Those nights were their comfort. Two people against the world, building a future out of love and sacrifice. Rose took extra shifts, skipped meals, and walked, or rather wheeled miles, to deliver supplies when the hospital cut her hours. On the days when her back hurt so much she could barely move, she'd still sit by the door, smiling, waiting for Emmanuel to come home from school. She'd listen to his stories, his dreams, his plans for college, and every time he said, "Mama, I'll make it. I'll take care of you someday," she believed him completely. Years passed, and Emmanuel's hard work paid off. He earned a scholarship to one of the best universities in the state. He studied business, worked nights at the library, and graduated near the top of his class. When he walked across that stage to collect his degree, Rose sat in the front row, tears streaking down her face, clapping with hands that shook from joy. That day she felt the weight of every sacrifice lift, if only for a moment. After college came opportunity. Emmanuel got a job in the city. He was ambitious, charming, and driven, the kind of man people noticed when he walked into a room. And then came Clara. She was beautiful, kind, and from a family that had more money than Emmanuel had ever imagined. At first, Rose was overjoyed. She thought her son had finally found love, the kind that could last a lifetime. But Clara's world was not like theirs. Her parents, the Prestons, had never known struggle. They came from country clubs, fine dinners, and polite smiles that hid judgment. And while they liked Emmanuel's charm, they didn't like his story, not his neighborhood, not his mother, especially not the idea that his mother, an aging woman in a wheelchair, would be part of their picture-perfect wedding. At first, Clara tried to defend him. She told her parents, "Love is about heart, not background." But whispers have a way of becoming truths when spoken in expensive rooms. Her mother would say things like, "He's wonderful, darling, but don't you think the press photos would look better without distractions?" Her father stayed quiet, but his silence said enough. Emmanuel started to change. Slowly. He began dressing differently, speaking differently, spending weekends at the Prestons' house instead of visiting home. Rose noticed the distance growing, like a wall built brick by brick. Still, she never complained. She'd call and say, "I just wanted to hear your voice, son." And sometimes he'd answer with a hurried, "I'm busy, Mama. I'll call you later." Late at night, Rose would sit by the window, watching the streetlights flicker through her curtains, wondering if success had stolen her son, wondering if love had taken the place she once held in his heart. Then came the engagement. The photos were beautiful. Emmanuel in a tailored suit, Clara glowing beside him, their hands intertwined. The article in the local paper read, "From humble beginnings to high society, Emmanuel Blake's inspiring rise." But one person's name was missing, his mother's. She saw it, folded the paper carefully, and placed it in her drawer. She didn't say a word, but that night she prayed. Not for revenge, not for attention, just for her son to remember who he was before the world told him to forget. They told him love could lift him higher, but first he had to let go of his past. 1 week before the wedding, Emmanuel made a decision he would never forget. As the wedding day drew closer, the pressure around Emmanuel began to tighten like a noose he couldn't see but could feel with every breath. The Prestons, Clara's parents, were polite in public, but their smiles carried weight. Behind closed doors, their words cut deep. One evening, during dinner at their mansion, Clara's mother leaned forward, her voice low but sharp. "Emmanuel, we respect your story," she said, pausing as if choosing her words carefully. "But your mother's condition might cause embarrassment. You understand, don't you? The photographers, the guests, they notice everything." Her father added quietly, "This isn't about shame, son. It's about presentation. People talk." And just like that, Emmanuel's chest filled with something heavy and wrong. He wanted to defend her, to say that his mother had sacrificed her body to save another life, but instead he nodded weakly, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes, because deep down he was afraid they were right. After that night, Emmanuel started dodging his mother's calls. Every time her name lit up on his phone, guilt followed. He'd stare at the screen until it stopped ringing, telling himself, "I'll call her tomorrow." But tomorrow kept slipping further away. Rose noticed the silence but never took it personally. She told herself he was just busy, planning his big day. She even started sewing her old pale blue dress, the same one she wore at his college graduation. Each stitch was made with hope. She smiled as she worked, humming quietly, thinking about how proud she'd feel watching him walk down the aisle. Meanwhile, one of Emmanuel's childhood friends, Jacob, saw what was happening. Jacob had known Mama Rose for years. She had fed him, cared for him when his parents were gone. So one afternoon, Jacob cornered Emmanuel outside his office and said, "Man, your mother deserves to be there. Don't let anyone make you forget where you came from." Emmanuel sighed, rubbing his temples. "You don't understand, Jacob. It's not that simple. Clara's parents, they—" But Jacob cut him off. "Then make it simple. It's your wedding. She raised you. You owe her that much." Those words burned into Emmanuel's chest, but instead of listening, he turned away. Later that night, Emmanuel called Mama Rose. His tone was softer than usual, but his words were sharp enough to wound. "Mama," he said, hesitating, "about the wedding. There's limited space at the venue. It's complicated. I'm so sorry, but maybe you could just watch the live stream. You'll still see everything." For a few seconds there was only silence on the other end. Then Rose's gentle voice came through, trembling but kind. "Oh, sweetheart, don't worry about me. I don't need a seat of honor. I just want to see my son happy. That's all I ever wanted." She hung up smiling, even though her eyes were wet. In the following days, Rose began to prepare quietly. She polished her old wheelchair until the metal shone like silver. She laid her dress on the bed, pressing the wrinkles out with careful hands. On her nightstand, she placed an old photograph, her late husband holding baby Emmanuel, both of them smiling at the camera. She whispered to it softly, "He's getting married tomorrow. You'd be so proud of him." That night, she barely slept. Not because she was sad, but because she was nervous, excited even. She thought of how beautiful the ceremony would be, of Emmanuel in his suit, of seeing him finally find happiness. She had no idea that her son had told everyone she wouldn't be coming. The next morning, she rose early. The air outside was cool, and the neighborhood was quiet, except for the distant sound of a church bell. She called for a cab, packed her small purse, and rolled herself to the front gate, clutching that same photo of her husband and child. Her heart was full of love, of pride, of a mother's unshaken faith in her son. She didn't want to interrupt, she told herself. She'd just stay at the back, quietly watching, smiling through her tears as he said, "I do." But what no one knew was someone else had seen her at the gate that day. The morning of the wedding was bright and flawless, everything Emmanuel had planned for months. The garden venue shimmered under the late spring sun, filled with white roses and laughter. Guests arrived dressed in elegance, clinking glasses as a pianist played softly in the background. Clara was radiant, her gown gliding across the floor like a ripple of light. The photographers snapped endless photos, every angle perfect, every detail designed to impress. It was the kind of wedding people envied, until the moment everything stopped. At the edge of the venue, a taxi door opened slowly. Mama Rose emerged, her pale blue dress folded neatly across her lap, her hands trembling just slightly as she adjusted the lace shawl around her shoulders. She had spent hours preparing, pressing her hair, polishing her wheelchair, clutching the photograph of her husband she'd carried for years. Her smile was soft, hopeful. She told herself, "He'll be happy to see me. He'll understand." As she wheeled toward the gate, a few guests turned their heads. Conversations faltered. The whispers began. "Is that his mother?" one woman murmured. Clara's mother spotted her instantly. Her perfect smile faded into a tight line. She leaned toward her husband and muttered, "I told you this would happen." Across the aisle, Emmanuel stood at the altar, the vows just beginning. The pastor's voice echoed through the hall. But then Emmanuel saw her. Everything froze. The world around him blurred, the flowers, the laughter, even Clara's hand in his. All he could see was his mother, sitting quietly at the back, her eyes full of love. For a heartbeat, the boy he used to be flickered in his eyes. Then fear took over. Fear of judgment, fear of shame, fear of losing everything he'd built in this new, polished life. He clenched his jaw, stepped away from Clara, and started walking down the aisle. Every guest turned, confused. The piano stopped mid-note. When he reached her, his voice came out sharp, louder than he meant. "You can't be here," he snapped. The guests went silent. "You'll ruin this." The words hung in the air like smoke. Mama Rose's lips trembled. Her eyes searched his face for the son she once knew. In a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "I raised you to be kind, my son." The entire hall felt that line, like a blade wrapped in love. A few people looked down, ashamed. Others just stared, frozen in disbelief. Emmanuel's heart pounded. He could feel the weight of every eye in the room. Clara tried to reach for him, whispering his name, but he shook his head. "Please," he muttered through clenched teeth, "don't do this here." Rose didn't move. Her voice was steady now, quiet, but clear. "I'm not here to take your day, Emmanuel. I just came to see my son happy." The murmur of guests grew louder. A few gasps, a few whispers. Someone in the back said, "He's talking to her like that? His own mother?" But Emmanuel didn't hear them. His pride was louder than the truth. He turned to the security guard near the aisle. "Please escort her out," he ordered. The man hesitated, just for a moment. Then he moved toward her, guilt in his eyes. As the guard reached for the wheelchair handles, the crowd shifted uneasily. One of the bridesmaids started crying quietly. Clara's face was pale, her hands trembling at her sides. Rose didn't resist. She only nodded softly, whispering, "It's all right, I'll go." As she turned, her small lace veil brushed against the carpet and caught on the edge. Her wheelchair jerked slightly. A young guest, barely 16, rushed forward to help her untangle it. The room was utterly silent. Rose looked up at the boy and smiled faintly. "Thank you, sweetheart," she said. her voice calm, unbroken. The boy stepped back, tears welling in his eyes. And then she left, rolling quietly toward the exit, the sound of her wheels echoing in the hall that had once been filled with music. Not a single guest spoke. Even the wind seemed to stop outside. Emmanuel stood frozen, staring at the empty doorway where his mother had just disappeared. His chest tightened, his throat dry. For a moment he wanted to run after her, but pride kept his feet glued to the floor. The ceremony continued, but the warmth was gone. Every smile felt forced. Every laugh died halfway. That was the last time many of those guests saw Mama Rose, but that wasn't the end. That was only the beginning of his downfall. The day after the wedding, the world that Emmanuel had tried so hard to build began to crumble, slowly at first, then all at once. What had started as whispers among the guests turned into murmurs online. Someone had filmed it, the moment he ordered security to remove his mother. The shaky video showed everything, the way her hands trembled, the way she whispered to him, "I raised you to be kind." Within hours, it spread like wildfire. On every platform, every page, there it was, a groom in his suit and pride, turning away from the woman who gave him life. The caption read, "He threw out his disabled mother at his own wedding." By morning, comment sections were flooded. Thousands of strangers weighed in, some furious, some heartbroken. "How could anyone do that to their mother?" wrote one user. "I don't even know her, but that broke me," said another. Hashtags formed overnight, Soir Justice for Mama Rose and Por the Forgotten Mother. The internet had chosen sides, and Emmanuel's name was no longer praised. It was cursed. In the Preston household, panic struck like a storm. Clara's mother stormed into the kitchen, phone in hand, voice sharp and trembling. "This will destroy our image," she cried. "Our daughter married into scandal." Her husband rubbed his temples, muttering, "We can't have this kind of attention, not now." They called publicists, tried to spin the story, but it was too late. The truth, or at least what the world thought was truth, was out. Every news outlet had the same headline: "Groom publicly humiliates disabled mother at wedding." Clara sat alone in their new apartment, scrolling through the comments, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't look at her husband the same way anymore. Within days, the cracks began to show. Their honeymoon was canceled. Invitations to business meetings vanished. Emails from potential employers suddenly went unanswered. One company sent a brief note: "Due to recent publicity, we are reconsidering our partnership." His reputation, the one he had built with careful words, polished suits, and borrowed smiles, was collapsing. Everywhere he went, people whispered. At the grocery store, at church, even on the street, he could feel the judgment burning through every polite glance. Late at night, Emmanuel would scroll through the comments himself, trying not to read them, but unable to stop. Every word was a wound. "He's heartless. That poor woman. I hope he learns what real shame feels like." He'd close his phone and bury his face in his hands. Clara would ask, "Why didn't you just let her stay?" And he had no answer, only silence. Some nights he'd dream of her, the sound of her voice calling his name when he was a child, the feel of her hand on his shoulder when he was afraid. The memories came like ghosts, haunting him in moments of stillness. One night, unable to sleep, he opened an old photo album buried in a box. There he was, age 10, grinning wide, pushing his mother's wheelchair through the park. The sun had been shining that day. She'd laughed as he raced her down the hill. The boy in that photo looked nothing like the man who had thrown her out. Online, people began piecing the story together. One of the guests, someone who couldn't bear the hate without context, posted a message that changed everything. "Before you judge," the post began, "you should know what that woman did for her son." The user shared photos, memories, stories from neighbors and friends. The world learned that Mama Rose had been a nurse who lost her mobility saving a child, that she had raised Emmanuel alone after his father died, that every step he took toward success had been built on her sacrifices. The post ended with a line that struck millions. She didn't show up to embarrass him. She showed up to see him smile. The message went viral. People began sharing their own stories about their mothers, the sacrifices, the unconditional love, the things left unsaid. Commenters who had once raged against Emmanuel now wept for Mama Rose. Her picture, sitting quietly in her wheelchair, eyes full of forgiveness, spread across the internet like a prayer. Artists painted her. Poets wrote about her. Her name became a symbol of grace in a world obsessed with image. But for Emmanuel, each new post was another mirror reflecting what he'd become. His career was gone, his wife barely spoke to him, and his mother, he hadn't heard her voice since that day. The guilt pressed heavier with each hour. He tried to call, but the line went unanswered. He sent messages, no reply. Days turned into weeks. He told himself he'd make it right, that he just needed time, but deep down, he knew. Some wounds don't wait forever. And when the truth finally came out, it broke millions of hearts. As the outrage spread, a deeper truth began to surface, a truth that no one had known, not even Emmanuel himself. It started with a single video posted by the same wedding guest who had shared the first clip. This time, it wasn't about the humiliation at the wedding. It was about who Mama Rose truly was. The video opened with faded photos of a younger Rose, smiling in her crisp white nurse's uniform, standing outside a hospital. The caption read, "Before the wheelchair, before the headlines, she was a hero." Years ago, long before the accident that changed everything, Mama Rose had worked the night shift at St. Mary's Hospital. She was known for her gentle touch, her soft laugh, and the way she treated every patient as if they were family. But one cold November evening, while heading home on a crowded city bus, tragedy struck. The bus lost control on a slippery bridge and overturned. Panic filled the air, people screaming, glass shattering, metal twisting. In that chaos, Rose didn't think twice. She pulled passengers free, one by one, ignoring the flames licking at the windows. She managed to save 3 people before the roof collapsed. Among them was a young man named David Blake, Emmanuel's father. In saving him, she changed the course of her own life. The weight of the collapsing metal crushed her lower spine, leaving her paralyzed from the waist down. She spent months in recovery, learning to breathe through pain, learning to smile through loss. And through it all, David, the man whose life she had saved, never left her side. Their bond grew from shared gratitude into love. Years later, they married, and Emmanuel was born, a living reminder of the night she lost her legs, but found a reason to live. Her sacrifice had given him life, literally. Without her courage that night, his father would have died before he could ever become one. Without her bravery, Emmanuel would never have existed. The irony was so cruel that it silenced even her harshest critics online. The internet that once judged her son now wept for her. The video didn't stop there. It showed scans of her old medical reports, copies of her nurse commendation, and finally, a letter, written in her delicate, uneven handwriting, addressed to her son years earlier. The camera lingered on her words as the voiceover read, "My dear Emmanuel, if I ever embarrass you, forgive me. I only ever wanted to see you smile. The world may forget the things I did, but your happiness will always be my reward." That single line shattered the internet's anger and replaced it with heartbreak. Comment sections flooded with apologies and tears. News outlets replayed the story of the nurse who lost her legs saving lives, one of them belonging to her future husband, one belonging to the man who would one day reject her. Headlines read, "The mother who gave everything and got nothing in return." Overnight, sympathy for Mama Rose became a global movement. People sent letters, donations, and prayers, and for Emmanuel, each headline felt like a dagger to the soul. Clara tried to stay. She tried to forgive him, but the shame was too heavy. One night, she packed her bags, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "I can't live with someone who forgot what love means." The door closed behind her, and Emmanuel didn't stop her. He knew he had lost her, just like he had lost everything else. Sponsors pulled out from his company deal. His phone stopped ringing. His friends distanced themselves. He was no longer the man people admired, but the man they whispered about. He began to live in silence. The apartment that once held laughter and music was now just echoes and regret. He'd sit for hours staring at the photo of him and his mother, taken years ago, her arms around him, her smile pure, his eyes full of hope. Now, those same eyes saw only guilt. He tried to reach out, to call her, but she never answered. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe she had finally learned that some love can only survive in silence. Each day, the weight of what he'd done grew heavier. The boy who had once promised to take care of his mother had become the man who broke her heart in front of the world. The same world now loved her more than he ever had. And yet, deep inside, he still hoped it wasn't too late. He still prayed that somehow she could forgive him. But fate wasn't done teaching him yet. Several weeks passed. The noise online faded, but inside Emmanuel's heart, the storm never stopped. The silence in his home had become unbearable. Every corner whispered her name. Every mirror showed him the man he didn't want to be. One rainy afternoon, unable to live with the weight of his guilt any longer, he made a decision. He took a long drive through the old streets of his childhood, past the bus stop where she used to wait for him after school, past the small bakery where she'd save up to buy him a birthday treat. Every turn was a memory, and every memory hurt. When he finally reached her old apartment, it felt like stepping back in time. The small window still had her lace curtains. The smell of lavender still lingered faintly in the air. But when he knocked, no answer. A neighbor opened the door quietly and told him she moved out after everything that happened. Emmanuel's voice trembled. "Where is she?" The woman sighed softly. "A care home on the hill. She said she wanted peace." Those words shattered him. Peace, something she had given the world but never received herself. Without a second thought, Emmanuel drove straight there, tears clouding his eyes as the sun began to set. The care home was quiet, surrounded by flowers and the gentle hum of the evening breeze. As he walked through the corridor, every step felt heavier, every breath slower, and then he saw her. She sat by the window, in her wheelchair, her frail hands holding a paintbrush. On the canvas before her was a soft golden sunrise, bright, calm, full of warmth. Her fingers trembled, but her eyes still carried that same light he remembered from childhood. For a long moment he couldn't move. Then his voice cracked as he whispered, "Mama." She turned slowly. Her eyes widened, a mixture of surprise, love, and the quiet ache of time. She smiled gently. "Emmanuel, you came." The sound of her voice broke him completely. He fell to his knees beside her, clutching her hands as tears streamed down his face. "I was blind, Mama," he whispered. "I was so ashamed of where I came from that I made you suffer for my pride. I forgot who I was because I forgot you." She reached out, her trembling hand brushing his cheek. Her touch was soft, forgiving, the kind of love that no sin could ever erase. She looked into his eyes and said, "You always wanted to rise, my son, but you forgot. Wings mean nothing if you cut your roots." Her words hung in the air like a sacred truth, wrapping the room in silence. Emmanuel broke down completely, his forehead pressed against her lap, his tears soaking her dress. "I'm so sorry, Mama," he sobbed. "If I could take it back, I would. I would trade everything, the fame, the money, all of it, just to earn your forgiveness." Mama Rose smiled, her voice breaking softly. "My forgiveness isn't something you earn, my son. It's something you already have." She placed her hand on his head, whispering, "You fell, yes, but the fact that you came back means you've already risen." Her words filled the air like music, healing, pure, and full of grace. Emmanuel looked up, eyes red but heart lighter than it had been in years. He stayed with her for hours that evening. They talked about small things, his childhood, her garden, the stories she used to tell him before bed. The sun dipped below the horizon, bathing them in a golden glow, as if the universe itself was witnessing their reconciliation. And then, for the first time since that terrible day, Emmanuel smiled, not out of pride, but out of peace. Sometimes redemption isn't about undoing the past. It's about facing it and choosing to love even when it hurts. Emmanuel had lost everything, but in that small room, beside the woman who had given him life twice, he found something far greater. He found his soul again. In the weeks that followed, Emmanuel made a promise to himself. He would no longer hide from the truth. One morning, he sat before a camera, no suit, no rehearsed lines, just his trembling voice and his honest heart. "I was wrong," he began, his eyes glistening with emotion. "I hurt the one person who sacrificed everything for me. I let the world's opinion mean more than her love. And if you're watching this, Mama, I'm sorry." His words echoed across millions of screens. There was no music, no filters, no performance, just raw, human remorse. For the first time, people saw not the man who had humiliated his mother, but the son who had finally found his way home. The clip of him kneeling before Mama Rose resurfaced. But this time, it wasn't filled with anger. It spread like a wildfire of compassion. Comment sections once filled with hate now overflowed with forgiveness and reflection. "We all make mistakes," one person wrote. "What matters is that he owned it." Another said, "This is what healing looks like." The internet, once his greatest enemy, became a witness to his redemption. The same image that had ruined his reputation now rebuilt his humanity. Mama Rose, though frail, watched quietly from her living room. Her hands rested on her lap, a gentle smile gracing her face as tears welled in her eyes. "He's learning," she whispered to her nurse. In that moment, she didn't see the pain of the past, only the beauty of a son finally becoming the man she always knew he could be. When a reporter later asked her how she felt, she simply said, "A mother's love doesn't end when a child fails. It begins when he learns to stand again." Her words touched millions, reminding the world that forgiveness is not weakness, it is strength in its purest form. He lost everything he built on pride, but regained the only thing that ever truly mattered, his mother's love. And maybe that's the lesson we all need to remember. No amount of success can replace the hands that first taught us to walk. No spotlight can outshine the quiet love that waited for us in the dark. Because in the end, when the applause fades and the world moves on, what remains is not what we built, but who we came home to. Before we close this chapter, let me ask you, what would you have done if this was your story? Could you forgive, or would the pain be too deep? Let us know in the comments below. Your thoughts matter. And before you go, if you're new here, click that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming true life stories. This was more than just a story of a wedding gone wrong. It was a story of humility, forgiveness, and the kind of love that endures even after the world has turned its back. Because sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what truly matters. Sometimes we spend our whole lives chasing approval, from strangers, from society, from people who may never truly see us. And in that endless race, we forget the one person who already did, the one who gave us life, who believed in us when no one else did. Mama Rose never needed grand gestures or fame. All she ever wanted was to see her son happy. And in the end, that simple truth became the greatest lesson of all. Sometimes we build our lives to impress the world, forgetting the one person who gave us life in the first place. But love, real love, doesn't need to be displayed, proven, or performed. It just asks to be remembered. So if this story touched your heart, take a moment to call your mother or hug the person who raised you, because the moments we take for granted today often become the ones we ache for tomorrow. If this story moved you, hit that like button. It helps us bring you more powerful stories every week. And tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were Emmanuel? Would you have had the courage to make things right? We'd love to hear your thoughts. And before you go, if you're new here, click that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming true life stories. Stories that remind us that even in our darkest moments, love, forgiveness, and humility can light the way home. This is not just Emmanuel's story. It's a mirror for all of us, a reminder that redemption is never too late, and that the greatest wealth in life will always be love.